Ah. Well, I don't choose these topics anymore. These are handed down to me by somebody on high. So some of the things that I say in the beginning of this speech, I'm not sure I even totally agree with, but I'm going to tell them to you anyway. So the basics of this conversation today is how do we tell the difference between the voice of our own ego and the voice of God?
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference? How do you know when you're hearing things internally that you're being guided and led or you're bullshitting yourself? It's hard to tell. So Eckhart Tolle says, when you recognize that there is a voice in your head that pretends to be you and never stops speaking, you are coming out of the unconscious identification with the stream of thoughts. When you notice that voice and you realize you're not that voice, you're the one who's aware of the voice. Freedom lies in knowing yourself as the consciousness behind the voice. Well, I'm not sure I can separate that out myself, but I do believe it is important to realize that our thoughts are created by a consciousness that is centered within us. And if you're a science minder, you believe that consciousness is the mind of God. That's right, the mind of God. We live and move and have our being within God. And the apparatus with which we think, our brain, is directed and guided and uses the mind of God. Hard to put your hard to really grasp and put your arm around, but that's the truth. So you remember Pepe the cricket in Pinocchio, was it? Jiminy Cricket. Yeah, that's right, Jiminy Cricket. These people got it wrong. Here I am quoting them, Pepe the Cricket. Jiminy Cricket. Anyway, he's the conscience. He's the inner voice of Pinocchio. And he kind of represents intuition. And the cricket is given his marching papers, told what to do by the Blue Fairy. And then the reason I'm telling you about the Blue Fairy is because the Blue Fairy is a girl. It's feminine. So that's important later in my speech. I want you to remember that the Blue Fairy is feminine. So, although Pepe is a Disney character, that metaphor, that representation is valuable to us in our thinking apparatus to realize that we actually can have an internal character which we create, which serves us as an avenue for the thought of God, for that intuition, which is vital to our existence. So how do I distinguish between the chattering voice of my ego and the voice of intuition? I'm going to give you a few ways to do that later. Dr. Ernest Holmes says that intuition is the voice of God inside us, which includes the ability to perceive truth beyond reason and logic. You know, I was a person who dedicated my life to reason and logic for most of the time, and never got me anywhere near wisdom. So I'm pretty much convinced that wisdom is a product of God, and that you have to be in an open and available emotional situation, mental situation in order to truly receive. So in a very real sense, and this is an important idea, everybody get this one, this is really important, okay? All intelligence is intuition. Must be. All intelligence comes directly from the mind of God, and that mind of God resides inside you. So all of your intelligence that you have is intuition. All of it. It all comes from the mind of God. I mean, Linda Webb Kalkaba and the minister down in Santa Rosa wrote this song. I'm going to try to sing it to you. Everything that I need to know about what lies before me is available to me through the mind of God within me. Everything I need to know is available to me through the mind of God within me. So our job, and our job today is going to be, for the remainder of the day, to look at ways that we can get in touch with that mind of God on a regular basis. The 11th step of the 12 steps says in AA that we're going to use prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Conscious contact being the most important thing you can do. So we don't think in terms of consciously contacting God, but that's what we're doing every time we do a spiritual alignment. We're doing conscious contact. We're centering ourselves in the truth and relating to God intimately and completely. So remember that all intelligence is intuition, must be the mind of God within you. So intuition means to learn from within, not external information, not logic, not fact, but to learn from within. It's something actually, knowledge and the ability to see things clearly arises from within you. Now, if you look at it from the opposite way, creation without the input from this highest source could result in pretty disastrous things happening. Imagine if you were not guided by the love of God, if the love of God did not exist, if all you had to depend on was external reality, your own logic. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if love was removed from the equation, how we would all behave. So we'll intuitively, 12 steps also say that we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And when we are embarked on this spiritual path, as we go forward, we're going to intuitively, we're going to learn from within, know from within how to handle situations which used to baffle us. So that's something you can depend on. It's been proven millions of times with millions of people that as they pay close attention to establishing a conscious contact with God, they intuitively know. Doesn't have to be proven to them anymore. So intuition connects us with our inner wisdom and helps us find answers beyond that which we can rationally understand. So to get this connection, perhaps there are some spiritual practices that we could use that would help us to establish that intuitive connection stronger and stronger. Now, of course, the primary way that most people would immediately talk about is meditation. I am not going to talk about meditation. You guys all know more about meditation than I do. And so you understand, and certainly know plenty of places where you can find out about meditation. Now, the second way is called visioning, and that's a process that Science of Mind, religious science organizations promote as ways to get their future laid out. And visioning is a practice used at centers, and it's a process by which we train ourselves to be able to hear, feel, see, and grasp God's plan for our life. It's based on the idea that we're not here to tell God what to do or ask God for things, but to be absolutely available for what God is doing. And that's from Dr. Michael Beckwith, from his course, Visioning a Way of Living. Another way that you could establish a stronger connection with God with an intuitive voice would be practicing the presence. And Joel Goldsmith said, the continual practice of presence, a recognition of God in all that we do, providing us with sufficient periods to enter into silence and awaiting an inner feeling that the Spirit of God is moving, makes God the principle that governs, supports, and sustains all of our experience. Now, this whole idea of practicing the presence of God came forth from a monk. His name was Brother Lawrence, I'm sorry. And he was a 15th century monk. And his small book, Practicing the Presence, is famous. Almost everybody's read it by now. And basically what he said was that to fully practice the presence, we must always be in conversation with God. So what he did when he did the dishes was not only think that he was doing it for and with God, but he talked to God about it. I'm doing the dishes now. Isn't this great? So consider that as a practical way of energizing that inner voice. Talk to God while you're doing what you're doing, about what you're doing. Get into a regular state of conversing with God, because that's going to promote your listening for God's response. Prayer and meditation, talking to God, listening for a response. So now Brigitte provided me with a great metaphor for another spiritual practice which we could all enter into starting today, and that is, I think we'll just do it right here, right now, okay? I'd like you all to close your eyes for a moment, okay? And I'd like you to visualize that inside yourself is a radio. And that radio has lots of different stations that you could dial into. And there's a little station selector on it. So you could dial into world chaos, or you could dial into personal difficulties, or you could dial into political baloney, whatever you want. Or there's one that's really rather a large one, and it says God's voice. You could dial into that one. Perhaps you could see that particular station, God's voice station, and you could select that station right now. Select that station. Let that be the one you want to consciously listen to. And now notice just to the left of the station selector is a volume knob. Okay? And I invite you to turn up the volume in the voice of God station. We talk about a still small voice. Well, how about let's choose personally, each of us, to make that voice louder in our lives, more available. I'm more aware of God's voice. I'm going to turn up the volume on my intuition. I'm going to notice when God is talking to me. It's going to be apparent. Got all that? Okay. You can do that, Brigitte.
I would like you to project something.
We're talking about the God of your understanding. It's not a God that lives here or in a church, temple, synagogue, mosque. It's your God. I think that's an important point. So we understand that
Whatever
it's
you say.
your God.
Sounds good to me. Okay, you got that? Got a little radio inside you. You can turn up the volume. You could select the station. You realize you're doing that all the time anyway. You're listening to what you wish to listen to. And sometimes what you wish to listen to is not what's good for you. Okay, yesterday was March the 8th. And March the 8th was International Women's Day. It's also the day that I met my darling girl, Brigitte. And so I am going to officially name March the 8th from this place up front as International Brigitte Day. Why not? International Brigitte Day. Okay, so in honor of these two momentous days in history, International Women's Day and the fact that Brigitte and I met yesterday, 40 some odd years ago, I have decided the remainder of my talk to talk about the sacred feminine. And the reason I want to do about that is because notice that I emphasized that the blue fairy was feminine. And so in history, if you look at the word wisdom, okay, in Greek history, the goddess of wisdom is Minerva. Or maybe I got that backwards. And in Roman history, the goddess of wisdom is Sophia. But in both cases, it's feminine. Wisdom is feminine, traditionally. And so one of the things that we've always prized in feminine ideas is feminine intuition. The idea that women have a natural talent for learning from within. Well, I want to claim that we all can have it if we choose to have it. And so what we're going to talk about today is the sacred feminine qualities that all of us can have if we choose to. But with women, a lot of them come naturally. So women know that they're guided by spirit. I think one thing that women do is they trust their gut. They trust their gut feelings, and therefore they are more easily guided and led by spirit than men are. That's just the way it is. It's hard for me to let go of my brain. My logical brain wants to tell me what to do all the time. I do not trust my gut as much as I should. Being able to be guided and led by spirit, okay, here's a Rumi poem, which I think really expresses it brilliantly. The breezes at dawn have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. So in a sense, this idea of being involved with spirit on a regular basis requires that you stay awake. Don't go back to sleep. So vulnerability is a primary feminine trait. This is a quote from Brigida. She says, being emotionally open and emotionally accepting are vulnerability in practice and are integral to femininity and to spirituality. It's true, being vulnerable. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Accepting, receiving, and surrendering. Able to gratefully receive gifts, open to input from others, and especially open to input from spirit. You could say that the feminine aspect of spirit that accepts and receives is the foundation of all creation. Accepting and receiving. So creativity, knowing that they have the power to design a better experience for themselves and their loved ones, a strong feminine trait. The creative impulse that comes from within is the natural creative expression of God. It comes more naturally to women than to men. Women are naturally more gentle, soft, tender in words and actions, compassionate, deeply aware of the difficulties and pains of others, coupled with a desire to lend a helping hand. Nurturing. The feminine aspect is nurture. Feeding others, helping others to grow. Nourishing is not only in the physical level, but also on an emotional and spiritual plane. Close, warm, motherly. Full of grace. Hardly ever think of it, hardly anybody describes men as gracious. It's usually women. Embodying and expressing divine love and the givingness of life. Communicative. Well, that's for sure. The average woman, I think, speaks about 30,000 words a day, with this is actually measured, people measure this stuff, and the average guy usually about 5,000. Yeah, it's a totally different way of being. Women are far more communicative. They share with others how they feel. Men almost never share with anybody how they feel unless they're forced to. Then maybe they might. Able to feel your emotions while not being controlled by them. Well, that's I think a desired goal for everybody, including all the women in the place. Accepting the emotions of others, that's peculiarly feminine. Consciously using emotions to power your creation of good. Being in the middle without being sucked in, to the muddle. Being responsive instead of reactive. And you may notice that all spiritually evolved and aware people can and do use these traits, male or female, especially in interpersonal relationships and always with children. So it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, these traits are available to you. And so any guys in the audience, I'm saying, embrace the feminine side of your spiritual self, allow yourself to grow in that direction, become more compassionate, become more communicative, become more available to your emotions and to the emotions of other people. Become, at least at some level, sacredly feminine. Why not? So I invite you to set an intent right now to fully express these aspects of the divine feminine within, the cosmic mother, the sacred feminine. And I'd like to end with another poem. I like this one. You are a volume in the divine book, a mirror to the power that created the universe. Whatever you want, ask it of yourself. Whatever you're looking for can only be found inside you. Whatever you're looking for can only be found inside you. Thank you.